Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for a webinar on school garden maintenance in the summer. This is a topic that a lot of people have asked Mass Farm to School to host because it is a tricky topic, and a lot of people struggle with this. Before we jump into Peter and the presentation, I'll just say that my name is Dinah. I am the Education Program Manager with Massachusetts Farm to School. I was a lifelong, actually history educator for 20 years in the classroom, and I joined Mass Farm to School about 3 years ago, and I get the privilege of supporting these professional learning communities, whether it's through educators, school garden coordinators, food service staff. And if you're not familiar with Mass Farm to School, we are a statewide nonprofit that works to connect farms to schools for local procurement, and also to increase local food purchasing in schools and food system education in schools, which includes school gardens, indoor and outdoor, curriculum in the classroom. We have different programs. One of our programs is called Harvest of the Month. We have a program for educators where you get a monthly newsletter that goes through crops, crop history, has curriculum, has book resources. There's a link at the end of the slide deck if you want to sign up for that. We have these professional learning opportunities throughout the year. This is our last one for this school year, but we are already busy getting our schedule for next school year together. We have 3 to 4 workshops a month on various topics. If there's something that you really want to see a workshop on, please get in touch with me. We also have networking throughout the year. We have different professional learning groups, educators, school garden coordinator groups, food service groups. We do a lot of policy work trying to get food system education and food purchasing as part of the state budget. And we have lots of newsletters that go out. So if any of those things are interesting to you, please get in touch and get on our newsletter. And I'm excited today to have Peter Germano with us. I'm going to have Peter introduce himself. I met Peter because Webster Public Schools is part of our Farm to School Institute this year. And I guess I met you, Peter, at a school garden coordinator meeting. So I'm going to have you introduce yourself, and when you want me to advance a slide, let me know. And if you're watching and you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll ask Peter. And if you want to speak, I can zoom you in so that you can speak during the webinar. Just let me know. And we will be sending this recording and the slide deck out at the end of the event, probably in a few days. All right. Thanks, Peter, for joining us.
Dinah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, my name is Peter Germano. I'm a Connecticut Master Gardener alumni. I currently teach at the Grow School in Dudley, Massachusetts, history and science. I'm also the Master Gardener for the Webster School District, which they have 3 gardens going over there between their elementary, middle, and their high school. I've been gardening all my life. One of my passions is getting everybody on board to see how enjoyable and how rewarding this can be, especially when it comes to our students. We've had a lot of luck with that this year at the Webster Middle School and at the elementary school. The organization has really taken off. I will say it's taken 2 to 3, almost 4 years now for that to happen. It doesn't happen overnight, but people love to jump on a bandwagon when they see success. And that's exactly what's happened. We have a tremendous amount of teacher and staff involvement at the elementary school and at the middle school. Some seasoned gardeners, some novice gardeners. We've got a great food director in Kelsey Sanders, who is sort of leading the charge with the contact with people and what have you, and running the meetings and pulling everybody together. So I'm very fortunate to have that person as our point person to get things rolling. And that's enough about me. Next slide. Thank you. Going back to like the ground up, I know this is sort of specifically about watering during the summer vacations, but it's important that we understand where we're coming from. And then for those that haven't even created their organization yet, it still might be the germination of an idea. I took the liberty of showing the core team that we had created in the Webster School District. And as I said before, number one is the food service director, who can tie in teachers. She can tie in the food service folks to support us, to use the products that we harvest for them. And then they also tell us what it is that they're looking for us to plant and harvest. Secondly is the head custodian. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're in a school, involve these guys and or women, okay? Because we're taking a part of their landscape, and these people get incredibly protective about their landscape, about the land, about the maintenance of that. And I found I've had an awful lot of luck building a good relationship with that organization. Master gardeners like myself help because we can kind of jump in and fill in the voids of knowledge that may exist. I also do all the carpentry. I build all the beds. I build all the trellises because I don't want anybody to have to worry about that or just see if somebody picks it up. I would rather do it until somebody steps up and says, "Hey, I don't mind doing that," and I say, "Okay," and then I would just relinquish it over to them. Next, and certainly equally important, are your diehard gardeners, the people who garden at home, people who've been doing this for their entire lives, people who are dying to get their hands into the soil, uh, within the school districts. These people are sort of like the backbone of at least of the Webster School District, I found, because they're the ones that are like, "Hey, I need flats. Hey, I need soil. Hey, I need grow lights. Hey, I want to grow more stuff in my classroom. Hey, what about hydroponics? Can we get a hydroponic system in here? Hey, my kids are dying to get out into the soil." And you can see where the energy begins to grow. Possible parent involvement. We oftentimes talk about that. I know at the school where I'm at, it's difficult because there's the query checks and what have you, and some people just feel it's just too much of a hassle. But in those districts where it's viable, I would certainly encourage that, even though there are some logistics, okay, that people need to go through. And certainly, last but not least, the Webster district, all their schools are surrounded by neighborhoods, okay? Uh, and there may be some opportunity there for a neighbor who has a child that goes there, who's there during the summertime with their kids, even though school isn't in. It could be a good resource just to come down because we usually leave the hoses out. Just come down and, give them that inch a week is what minimum is what they need. And they may be, open to do that. Next slide. Thanks. Again, go to your custodians. Ask them, as gardeners, we know the sunlight requirements, we know the water requirements, we know what side of the buildings are the best places to put them. But you need to go to these guys and say, "Hey, look, this is what we're thinking about," because they'll come up with, like in my particular case, they said, "Peter, you can build them there, but I'd like you to have you put down landscape paper. I want you to put rock over it so we don't have to weed it, we don't have to uh, mow in between the beds." And then when you do that, they're happy as a clam because you've come to them, you've asked them, they've given you their input, and it was certainly doable. And you walk away, everybody walks away with a good taste in their mouth, and that's what you want. So we can keep this up. Look for them for possible summer support. Guys, they're there all summer. Those are the guys in the trenches doing the floors, doing the walls, and what have you. I've had numerous people like that within that organization say, "Hey, when are you going to be gone? Do you need me to water?" And it's usually yes or no, or I already have somebody in there. So that could be like a ready-made stopgap for any watering requirements and any future garden expansion. We're always looking to expand our raised beds, if you will. We're looking to put in sensory gardens. I went to our head custodian for Webster. I told him what we proposed, and he said, "Yeah." He says, "All right, as long as you understand that there's electrical lines over here, you can't do it there. There's water lines over here, you can't do it there. These guys will give you all of the knowledge that you asked them for, so it will be successful." Next. Okay, master gardeners, like I said before, to fill in the gaps in the knowledge. Okay, there's so much information out there on the internet. There's so much information out there in books. It's just, some of it ranges from good to bad advice. Okay, and then everywhere in between. And sometimes it's kind of difficult to kind of sort through all of the information. But number one, anybody can become a master gardener of their state. Okay, Massachusetts, and I know in Connecticut, they run classes from January through May, and at the end, it culminates in this rather comprehensive test. And then you get to wear the badge that says that you're a master gardener. But rather than have people go through all of the information literature that's out there, it's much easier for them just to come to me and say, Peter, what do you think? Or sometimes I'll even go to them, knowing that they've been lifelong gardeners, and I'll talk to them and we come to some conclusion of what it might need as far as soil recommendations, the amendments, Peter, we usually till our soil, and then of course now with the microbial evidence that's out there, we may not want to do that. We may just want to dig a small hole and plop in a seed or a plant. Product varieties that do well in this area, fertilization, you want to slow release 10-10-10. Do you need blood meal? How much nitrogen should be put into the soil, okay, because of what you're growing there. Pathologies, Mr. Germano, we got this white stuff on our squash plants. What is this? Well, it's either the mildew or downy mildew, depending on where it's at. And then again, to the building of the raised beds, doing any carpentry that might be necessary, trellis work or what have you. Next. Here's the diehards. Okay, these are the soldiers. These are the people that'll be there every day for you, every day. And they have a real passion for it with their kids. They want to get their students into it. Okay, they want to be able to show them what to do, be it from the seedlings in the classroom, hardening them off outside their classroom doors, to putting them into the soil, taking the kids out, have them maintain it, have them do some of the weeding, some of the watering while they're still in class. There's so much that can be done with the students by these diehard gardeners that this is sort of where the rubber hits the road. Because I told the folks that I work for over there at Webster, my ultimate goal is kind of to work out of this job and then just give it over to the middle, high, and elementary schools and let them run the whole thing, unless there's some heavy lifting. Like I usually get the soil for them from the town and I move it around and what have you. But I mean, other than that, these are the folks that we really rely on. Next. Parent involvement, often discussed, difficult logistics, as it says, availability, transportation, concerns. Again, Webster, adjacent to all the neighborhoods. It could be easy if folks wanted to get out there and begin asking some of the parents of some of the students if they wouldn't mind. Right now, we don't need to, because in all honesty, I kind of pick up where everything else is lacking. Okay, when people take vacation, I always make sure that I'm around. I don't often want to have to do that, but it's because I'm one of the drivers of it. I feel responsible, so I'm going to do it. Okay, I plan my vacations around where other people are taking vacation. But it would be nice to know that you could have some other people come in to do this type of work. I was in the hallway the other day, and there's nothing like those 30-minute conversations, 30-second conversations when I stopped one of our new teachers. I said, hey, would you be open to doing some watering during the summertime? He lives in the next town over. I says, I'm not asking you when, but I just want to know if you would be open to it. And he says, yeah. He says, as long as I'm around, I'd be open to it. And it took a 30-minute conversation. Okay. And he hadn't been involved with our gardens up to this point, but he was open for it. So, we will take advantage of that. Let him feel good about it. Let him feel as though he's contributing to it. And then his students, and he would certainly benefit from it. Okay.
Peter, do you think there's some opportunity to talk to like a parent-teacher organization if people have like a PTO or a PTA at their school to get a parent group involved? Perhaps they could coordinate?
Absolutely. I think that would be a wonderful idea if they did approach that organization. This way here, you get more bang for your buck by addressing the group and then getting those folks involved. I know some of the logistics might be difficult, some of the hurdles, but that's okay. It's not insurmountable. So it would really be we hadn't even thought about doing that. And it's probably because, I hate to say it, but I usually pick up the slack. So nobody's really had the need yet to do that. But it would certainly be a great opportunity, I think, to be able to tie that in. And maybe even, I know some school districts are within community gardens. there might be an opportunity there to someone who helps manage community gardens that also might like to be able to come into the fold and help out. But I think the PTO would be great.
At one of the schools in our institute, they have each classroom has like a class parent that's actually assigned to the garden. So it's not just your typical classroom parent, but it's a parent who's specifically going to be a garden parent. So that's another option for parents.
That's great. Much deeper involvement when they come in at that level and with that type of a commitment. And it's nice how it ties the students, faculty, staff, and the parents together. And then this is the whole thing. How much maintenance does it require? Well, we know typically you're going to get an inch of rain a week, okay, which doesn't sound like much, but if it's in between several hot days, it may require more. So how much watering is needed? Is weeding necessary? Or do you put down landscape paper or maybe some type of a mulch to keep the weeds down to where it's not necessary? Do you need somebody to come and harvest? We've run into this problem a lot in that, and everybody knows this, especially in this region. When those tomatoes become available, it's usually when kids are around or it's past, which is a difficult thing to watch and see because it's the timing of it. Because of the way that climate's been changing, I'm starting some tomato plants later, and I'm going to be putting them out later, just as an experiment to see how far into the fall they can now go with the weather patterns that we've been seeing that may lend themselves to be able to be harvested later into the new school year. You know, we can get the spinaches, the Swiss chard, the lettuces, and what have you to grow. If you got cold frames, you can pick them in January. But it's that one fruit. It seems like the tomatoes, you know, like the premier fruit that people are after, as well as squashes and what have you, are important too. Next.
So Peter, you might get into this, but I'm wondering at some point if you, and you don't have to talk about this now, but if at some point you talk about planning the garden based on what will grow later when students are there.
Mhm.
Just keep that in your head for a question.
Absolutely, sure. How much time were you asking for a commitment to people? Like the gentleman that I spoke to, I says, it doesn't take very long, and until and if we get like an automatic watering system, it may take you 30 minutes to do 14 beds. It doesn't take that long. So it's not a huge commitment. If they live close by, usually it's not a hardship on them. An automatic watering system would be best if it can be afforded, if it's viable to do it, you know, within your gardens. We have some really small gardens. We got 14 beds at one school, we got 12 beds at the other school, and we've got some 8 beds at another school ready to add 2 more raised beds. It doesn't take that long of a commitment to do that. Again, we talked about parents, custodians. Where's the water source? Does somebody have to drag a hose, you know, all the way across some ungodly obstacles, maybe to be able to water? At all of our schools, everything is sort of like right there, so it's not an inconvenience. The hoses and the nozzles are always readily available, although we did lose 2 nozzles last year, but that's a small price to pay for the convenience for people to be able to just walk up, turn on the water with a special tool, and then go ahead and water the produce. Now, what's the rain forecast? You may not need anybody, and maybe a lot of this preparation was for naught. But when it is necessary, it's necessary, as we know, because we don't want to let anything go to waste. And is there a greenhouse involved? What's in the greenhouse? What about that care? Sometimes that takes a very specialized type of care, but that needs to be woven into the planning of the entire gardening experience.
Peter, do you have any, while we're on this topic, do you have any tips for training people? What if you have parents who people don't know how to water or how much they want to help, but they don't know what is that, how do I water, etc.
What I tell people is that, okay, you can go ahead and water the plants, okay? But the most important thing you need to be able to do is visualize as that water soaks through the soil, how deep is it getting? Because some people think, oh, that's enough, but it really is only like a superficial watering. I tell people who don't know, after you get done watering, stick your finger down in the soil. See how deep what you put on soaked into the soil. It may go, 2 or 3 inches down, which might be far enough depending on at what stage the plants are at, or it may not go, farther than an inch, and it's going to evaporate within the next day or two. The most important thing, though, to me is to visualize it, put your hands in the soil, find out how deep it's gone, and then gauge it from there. Because you hear we only need an inch of soil a week, an inch of rain a week, and that would suffice on average. Okay, sometimes you need more, sometimes you don't, depending on if it's raining out this week or not. So all of those things, the main thing is just get in there and dig into the soil with your hands. And it won't be long before you understand the concept of what watering is intended to do.
And then one other question on this topic, Peter, is if you have a school, I'm imagining Webster, can you just leave things out, or do you need to lock things away? How do you have any tips for if a school is not in an area where they could leave the hose and nozzle out, but they might have to put it away, etc.?
You could use a locked box. Many times you see like like the big Tupperware type hose holders. You could use that as a locked box. Very important is that where you turn the water on in the spigot, that it takes a special tool. You don't leave the handle on it. It like at all of our schools, we need a special tool that's able to turn it on. So like kids just don't come by and randomly turn it on and think it's funny that they're just running water, because that would be a terrible waste. But that would be important. And like I said at the outset, we lost two nozzles at the Webster schools. They're like between $3 and $5. Sometimes that's just the price of keeping it convenient. Nobody's ever stole a hose. And like I said before, it does take a special tool to turn the water on. So if we got to replace, a couple of nozzles during a growing season, and most of it is really funded through grant money. It's not as though it's a hardship on an individual. To me, it's like a worthwhile loss to be able to keep everything going. What I will say is that we know, as I was going over there in the evenings or what have you, people in the neighborhood walk by and they go use like the gym sets and what have you. Things never get picked fast enough as far as I'm concerned. As soon as they're ready, just pick them, just harvest them. But it's like families are coming by. Numerous times I would call them over and say, please pick some tomatoes. Just take them home. If there was some squash ready, here's some squash, take it home. I think it's good relations with the community. Nothing goes to waste. This year, two gentlemen stepped up at the elementary school and they asked for lumber because they wanted to build a stand where we could actually put excess harvest with like a free sign over it that says, anytime there's something here, please just come take it so it doesn't go to waste. So that really helps when we're not there and available to call them over. Spirit wasn't. It's a good question. Those three function until the core group. Looking for the diehards again. I usually one person who, maybe a guy like me would step up if nobody else is around. And if it can't wait, well, I know I'll always jump in. If it needs weeding, sometimes I just drive by the schools and I'll just look at them to see what's going on. Sometimes I know, especially like in the middle school, there's a couple of teachers that always bring their kids out and I see some weeds in there. No, I'm just going to leave it, because I know that they're going to come out within a day or two and I don't want to deny them the pleasure of working in the garden. Slow release fertilizers, 10-10-10, great side dress to use. Okay. For most of your crops, it's a nice balanced blend. As opposed to something more specific. You may need blood meal for, like for nitrates, several other slow release fertilizers that are available today that go more toward the fruit and the roots, because the nitrates we know grow the stuff above the ground. The phosphates and the potash help everything below the ground. So you don't want to put too much nitrates in a tomato plant, because then what you get is a lot of green, and it kind of ignores the fruit from developing. So you got to be careful with things such as that. But a 10-10-10 is a nice way to start. Ground cover, cardboard, lasagna gardening is what they call it. I practice it here at my house all the time. I've never had so many worms in my garden than when I lay down my ground cover of cardboard through the winter, and then I take it off in the springtime, and it's just brimming with worms, which of course, let off their castings, which add beautiful fertilizer to the soil. But sometimes you can use, it's called chopped and cooked hay. You can use that. And once it gets wet, it forms like a crust over it to keep the moisture in and keep the weeds down. You can use hay. The only problem is that the hay seed, if people have a problem with weeds growing, being hay, you may not want to do that. Maybe chop straw that doesn't have the seeds anymore, and it would be helpful. Landscape paper. We have a horrible blight here, early and late, and it lives in the soil. And whenever you water, and that water bounces up off the soil, it contains the blight, and the blights get on the leaves. And you can see how the leaves eventually will wilt and die. And sometimes it's a race between the plant becoming defoliated or the fruit ripening. So if you put down like a landscape paper around it, that certainly lessens the chance of that blight bouncing up as a result of watering. And that's where, if you could use like a watering system, like a soak hose that goes underneath the soil, that gives enough of moisture to the plant, you don't have that effect of the water bouncing up on the leaves, contributing to the blight. I love this part because there's so much we can do. I'm not sure if anybody's seen the movie. I think it's on Prime, The Biggest Little Farm, about the dog and the family in California. That I that just excites me to be able to show it to people for the first time, because there's so much that we can do. When we look out, we say, man, that doesn't look hopeful at all. And all of a sudden we watch that movie, it's like, yeah, we can do anything with hardpan. But when I look at like pollinator gardens, okay, what a wonderful thing for kids to be able to get in here and grow, to be able to plant something close, like the Joe Pye weed, or the bee balm, or the cone flowers, or the milkweed, or the goldenrod, and just a profusion of color and goodness to bring the bees in, to bring in the butterflies. Fruit trees, what could be nicer than to make a small orchard? We have some land on the school that I'm currently at, to where we want to clear it and just build a small orchard there to kind of round out our offerings. We don't own the land, but I'm hopeful that maybe pulling the Biggest Little Farm trick of maybe adding a few chickens to the landscape, I think would be really great for students to learn a little bit of animal husbandry, and just to be able to enjoy something like that, like chickens roaming the property. What could be better? Questions, observations, input?
Yeah, we'd love to hear where people are coming from, and I can zoom you in if you want to share with Peter, or you can just put in the chat, or the chat, like, do you have school gardens? What brings you here? Do you have any questions? Are there any specific questions that you're trying to tackle in your own school gardens?
And I'm sure there's a multitude of knowledge out there on the other side of this screen with people who have been doing it. Okay. And there's so much more to add to all of this by everybody. I understand that. It's the type of subject that people could talk about all day. Truly, they could. And people just keep learning.
Yeah, if you have, and if you're here and you have ideas that you want to add to people on how you deal with your gardens in the summer, please add that to the conversation. We have a question here, Peter, from Molly. Hi, Molly. Did you get your gardens approved through the Department of Health?
We didn't have to with the school, although we did begin to make a community garden on the school property, and it was just above a pond. And we had to go through some of like the zoning people in town to make sure that the site that we were going to be clearing and developing met their needs and wetland needs, which it all did. Okay. And then any necessary permits, a guy by the name of Fred LeBlanc went off and got. He was like the lead carpenter in this particular effort for the school. But we did do that for the community garden, but we didn't need it right there on the school property for our raised beds. That wasn't necessary. But we did go through the school committee to make sure that everything was okay. And we assumed that the people on the school committee would know if there was any questions that needed to be asked or permits needed to be gained or what have you.
And Molly, I just want to follow up by saying that Mass Farm to School, in conjunction with MDAR, created a school garden food safety program, because what we heard from some schools and districts was that they wanted to garden, and they were gardening, but the students weren't allowed to eat from the garden. And so we developed a self checklist audit that in the hopes that this would lessen some of the concerns and the pushback. And at the end of the self checklist, if a school needs some kind of larger certification, MDAR can go to the school and work through this school garden checklist so that students can eat from the garden. Because we know that if students grow things and they can't eat them, that's quite tragic. So I will put the link to that in the chat as well. It's a self-guided audit. Are there other questions or experiences people have? How do you all take care of your school gardens? Or do you have any other questions that bring you here today? I hear birds through Peter's window, but I don't see questions.
Well, hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully we could help folks out.
Oh, here we have a question here or a comment from Lauren. Thanks, Lauren. I have been the volunteer garden chair of my organization for almost 3 years. Summers are hard because of the time commitment to water, harvest, weed, etc. I started a summer garden club to invite people to join me on regular occasions when I'm out there doing chores. And sometimes I get a lot of visitors and sometimes I don't. How would you recommend getting more parents out with their kids to harvest, etc.?
Well, I do like the idea of reaching out to the PTO. Certainly makes an awful lot of sense. Okay. I know teachers are constantly in touch with parents through daily point sheets. And we send out notifications using these point sheets with parents. Sometimes our clinicians will reach out to parents. But it's usually those avenues that we would pursue. As far as a garden club, I think that would be great. I couldn't start that, but I would certainly, bring that thought and idea to some of our diehard gardeners that may see that as a viable organization to start with. Many of our teachers travel, okay, to their school systems. Not many of them seem to live in the same town. So there's also the proximity that would help if people live nearby, and then, the transportation time wouldn't be an issue. But I think through those avenues would probably be our best outreach for parent involvement.
And I would add to that, Lauren, that I wonder if some of the reluctance or just the not showing up is because, one, parents don't know about the gardens, possibly. Or two, I think some might be reluctant that they don't know how to take care of a garden. Maybe they don't have any experience, or maybe they're nervous about their level of ability, and so they are reluctant to go. So I think that it would be really interesting. I think what you do sounds really interesting, that you invite people to join you so that they can learn actually how to take care of the garden. And I think offering, if you're able to offer like a workshop a basic care workshop, something like that, that might get more parents to go with students with their own children to actually learn. Or a day where the students who have been in the garden can teach their parents how to do it, like an open house maybe. And some of the students can show off some of the things that they've learned and get that kind of family excitement going. Either of those things might lead to more parents getting out there.
Sure. And even have something prepared during your parent teachers night. Although we only have one in the fall, it may not be a bad place to plant a seed to some people who may show some interest that might live in the area. Unfortunately, we're like a regional school. We take from like 17 districts throughout Worcester County, but many of them have to be bused in. So the locale, I think, is always an issue with people. But like in a town like Webster, like I say, where the neighborhoods are right up against the school buildings, it would certainly be a great opportunity to get the word out. Well, like with a flyer and a contact list.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I don't know if your school has any kind of outreach, Lauren, like maybe it would go home in whatever newsletter the school puts out, or if there's a website or whatnot with more information.
I know like the art club does that a lot. The art club has like a monthly newsletter to tell the parents what's going on. So some other departments may already be doing that. It's just the idea of sort of piggybacking onto that distribution list would be a good idea.
And I would say that I think one of the goals is to have the students doing more of this, right? And not the adults. So I think that even having students at a school create a newsletter that goes home. I mean, even as part of an academic project, maybe that could get the excitement up. We have a comment in the Q&A, and then Lauren added a question. Karen says, I oversee garden programs in more than 100 schools in Fairfax County, Virginia. Hey, Karen from Virginia. Many of our schools use Sign Up Genius to get support in advance of the end of the school year. I love it. So we have worked very hard to focus much of our edible gardening in our academic year. Yeah, so Peter, I'm going to look at, thanks, Karen, so much for that. And yes, Sign Up Genius and using those online tools are great ideas. Peter, in a minute, can you get back in a minute to talk a little bit about ways to think about planting for the times when kids are in school? But Lauren had a question, which is a follow-up comment. I also have questions about managing a garden by committee. I started a committee. I have a few parents who have joined, but I would love suggestions on how to divide duties and responsibilities. So Peter, any suggestions for how to do a division of labor? Like what are some categories that Lauren could use to divide the duties?
Well, within our core committee, they are representatives from each of the 3 buildings. Okay, so we would utilize those people as our contacts to find out what it is they want to grow and where. And oh, by the way, with crop rotation, what needs to go where. And so far, we've been really lucky at that everybody has sort of melded together and came up with a plan, except we did have an issue last year. It's funny you mentioned that, to where some new people had come in and all of a sudden things started growing in places that we didn't expect them to grow. And then, but then we also realized that, well, maybe we just need to involve more people or reach out to more people to join us as like maybe not the core committee, but other people who are interested in just planting and growing. So that's what we did. We brought everybody in who had put something into the garden last year, because it kind of looked like a mishmash a little bit. And then we started talking about, that's really not the most efficient way to use the available beds that we have. And by bringing those people in, having discussions, we've sorted out to where people know what they're going to be planting and where and why that makes sense. A lot of it is just communication and bring people in, because it seems like everybody now who comes in are more than willing to be open-minded and work at what it is that they want to do and share it with everybody else.
Are there, besides, I suggested to Lauren that maybe you could also divide spatially by boxes or garden spaces. So certain people might be in charge of certain areas. But are
Mhm.
there ways to divide the tasks? Like could there be a committee that, or a person that, like, watering is their thing, and then you have a weeding group, but they're weeding a specific thing? Like, how can you organize so kind of people take ownership of a
The
duty?
most difficult thing to do is to get all those players into a room. We found that incredibly difficult to be able to get everybody into the room because you always have people who have conflicting schedules, and we understand that. Okay. The problem with that is that, some people will hear it, but then you have to disseminate it through email. And then people get it at different times. Okay. It is sort of a difficult thing to do. But if you can get the buy off from the majority of people to, like, maybe take responsibility for beds A, B, and C, and then to be able to divide the workload there, you might be better off that way. But we just, I like talk to everybody in all the schools to kind of coordinate everything that's going on, which I love doing. I don't mind that at all. Uh, but it is possible. And really, without that, we ran the risk of coming up with this hodgepodge that we didn't see coming. It sort of kind of caught us on our blind side when I would go over there. I'm like, well, who's growing this and who's growing that? And how come this didn't get harvested this year? Uh, and come to find out it was beans. So I picked up my saves and I actually saved the beans so they could grow them again this year. But it was sort of eye opening. And we had been at it for a solid 3 years already when that happened. So it's something to watch for. And it was a really good question. How do you alleviate problems like that cropping up? And you'll always have things like that coming up, especially with newly created gardens and what have you. But some people can anticipate those shortfalls. I hope that helps.
Molly,
Especially, go ahead.
Molly wrote, did I hear you say you have a greenhouse? If so, I have a lot more questions. Do you have a greenhouse, Peter?
We just had a 10 by 20-foot greenhouse put up this year, which we didn't have before. We didn't even have raised beds. Okay, so this is like the first year at the Grow School. But yeah, we do have a 10 by 20. We have a nice piece of software in there now where we monitor the heat and the humidity of it. But yeah, go ahead, ask some questions and I'll do the best I can because every greenhouse you learn something new.
Molly, there is definitely an interest in green. We're going to try next professional learning cycle to have a greenhouse workshop, because there are definitely greenhouses going up, and there's questions about management, etc. Molly said, how did you get funding to get your greenhouse going, Peter?
Our school actually had some money in the budget. It wasn't through a grant. Okay, we're still waiting to hear from the grants that we've applied for, and it's very late now in the grant season. But we were lucky; we had around, I think it was 3,500, I'll say, to put up this greenhouse. And of course, we supplied the lumber, we supplied the manpower, we did all the construction of it, and it looks like it's going to be very successful.
So that was that was given to you as a, just, we happen to find some extra money. Do you want a greenhouse?
Yeah, well, it was more or less us advocating for it. Say, hey guys, we really need this for our kids because we have the regular school and then we have the developmental uh, school, okay, which kids with certain handicaps, and we wanted to be able to involve them into it also. So this is a really nice amenity that we have to be able to bring these young people through. So it was really short money, to tell you the truth, to have such a nice amenity on the property.
Well, so for those people who don't find money, we do have a list of grant opportunities, excuse me, on the Mass Farm to School website, and we do keep it updated. So there are grants for things. I'm wondering also about the PTO. And I was at a workshop recently, and someone was talking about a very inexpensive greenhouse that is made by Harbor Freight.
Oh.
And I actually was looking it up. They have all different sizes, but not very expensive and different sizes. I was reading some reviews on the Harbor Freight greenhouses, and they do need, to be put together well, put
Mhm.
together, and there are some modifications that people do to them. But if you are in a school program and you don't have a lot of money, I might go online and check out the Harbor Freight greenhouses. They look pretty simple, but
Mhm.
I have been told by different garden coordinators that they're affordable.
Yeah, we had one on the property. This is just before this was the year I came to the school, as a matter of fact. They had a 6x8, Lexan sides and like the metal ribbing and what have you. We're in a place where we experienced a lot of wind. And that year, the wind actually took the greenhouse right off of its foundation and just tore the thing apart. So that to me is the number one area to look at to make sure that it is in a place where you can secure it on a good foundation. Okay, so placement, sunwise is important, but that wind can be insidious when it comes to destroying greenhouses.
Oh, great. Thank you. Karen, thank you, Karen. Karen added that the U.S. Botanic Garden has an excellent online resource on greenhouses for educators.
No,
And Karen highly recommends it for any schools considering it. And thinking about the sustainability of that part of the program is super important in Karen's experience.
that would be great. Many of them don't. One area of concern that I do have, like with ours, is the ventilation. Even though we're out in sort of a brisk, windy area, there never seems to be enough when you need it, especially in the dead of summer. So there's always the ventilation issue with the heat buildup in these greenhouses. Many of them, many people install the thermostatically controlled venting systems in it. I I worked at a rather large greenhouse for a couple of years, a few towns down from us, as a matter of fact, that had an enormous system, and it was necessary because that heat, when it starts, even though you put the coverings over them, like a light cover during the summertime, and even a black cloth during the wintertime to keep the heat in, they really do need some good ventilation. So it's always something to keep in mind as part of the expenditure, and it's necessary.
Are there other questions or thoughts people want to share or topics? Oh, Lauren, thank you. Lauren wrote in the Q&A that Lauren, they have a Canopia by Palram 8x12 greenhouse from Costco.
Oh,
Could you please share with me more about the monitor you use? I purchased a hygrometer for our school greenhouse, and I could not get it to work with the school's Wi-Fi because it uses an app that requires a district username and password. So the help desk people with the district recommended I find a different hygrometer. Peter, is there anything that you would recommend for that school greenhouse?
right now we're using something called Govee, Govee Home, and it's a small monitor that you hang in your greenhouse, and it gives you temperature, which is adjustable for cutoffs for notifications, as well as humidity cutoffs for notifications, and it registers 24 hours a day by the minute what the temperature is within the greenhouse and what the humidity level is. And it sends you notifications. Like we have it set for like 77. Anything over 77, I get an alert on my phone, which, I mean, what could be better? Okay. And it was really sort of inexpensive, and it runs off of your Wi Fi. It's called Govee, capital Govee.
Thanks, Peter. I put that in the chat.
Mhm. Good. It's really proven worth its weight because it tells me when I got to go down and open it up or close it up.
Oh, Lauren said that's the one that they have at the school, and Lauren loves it at Lauren's house, but sadly they won't let Lauren connect it at the school.
Yeah, that's always an issue because it probably does put a drain on your Wi-Fi. I can understand that, but it is a great amenity to have. Especially, I'm like 9 miles away, and I can sit here in the middle of the night and like monitor what's going on in my greenhouse.
Oh, wow.
Not that it keeps you awake at night, kind of.
Karen put the chat, the Botanical Garden House greenhouse manual in the chat. I just thank you, Karen. I just popped that in the chat for people. Other questions or ideas people want to share or thoughts for Peter? While you're thinking, I'll tell you that we have Mass Farm to School. If you're not subscriber on our newsletter, please subscribe. You can stay up to date on all of our webinars and professional learning, virtual and in person, networking opportunities. There's a link on this slide deck for the Harvest of the Month. And we have an ongoing events page. And I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna get the, while we see if anyone has any more questions, I'm just gonna grab the school garden food safety link and put it in the chat. Peter, you have any thoughts to share while I look for that?
Nothing comes to mind right now. Just,
Oh,
good luck
sure.
with your gardening.
Peter, will you just list like what are like your favorite crops to grow that don't require summer? What are some crops you love growing that either come up in the fall or spring? If someone didn't want to deal with the summer, or they just couldn't find people to handle this.
Starting your lettuces and your spinach in September in cold frames. They'll grow until it doesn't get above 50 degrees anymore. But if you put it in a cold frame, those crops will last until January. I found there's a great book called The Four-Season Gardener out there by a gentleman by the name of Coleman. And it's a wonderful resource. And he talks extensively around cold frame gardening in there. And I found that just a wonderful thing to do, because what it led me to is the use of cold frames in ground covers, which has allowed me to, and I've never been able to do this before in Massachusetts, or excuse me, Connecticut. Rosemary stayed alive through the winter under ground covers, and I've never had that happen before. So it sort of extended my growing season with the cold frames and the ground covers throughout the year. It wasn't a terrible winter, but nevertheless, it was still winter time, and it actually survived, which was like wow to me. And then of course your early season crops, your lettuces, your spinaches, your Swiss chard, your radishes, until you get into the heat of the summer, and then you start getting into the more variety of crops, but also the maintenance of them.
So your colder root vegetables, getting those in also, and your roots that might overwinter, or your root vegetables that can be harvested in the fall.
Right, exactly. And the use, I can't emphasize enough the use of a cold frame. It just adds a whole new dimension to your gardening. And the kids love it because they'll go outside and they can't believe what they see and what they actually had to eat. But there was another occurrence at the Webster school system. I made 2 4-by-16-foot beds, and one of them is sort of close to the building. And it was so funny because the last crop we had was a lettuce variety mix, and I let it set there as well as the spinach. But it was close enough to the building, within 6 or 8 feet, to where that lettuce and that spinach went dormant. And come this past spring, it popped right back up again, which was like, wow, that too was eye-opening to me, because usually like you clean out your beds and you get rid of everything. I'll tell you what, this year that showed me that's not necessarily has to be the case when you're maintaining a garden. I would say experiment with some of these things, the ground covers, things are close proximity to a building, crops such as those hardy, slightly frost-resistant crops, and see how far you can take them. I love experimenting with them. I take a lot of tomato seeds and I ferment them, and I did that the year before last. But when I planted them last year, I found I had just enormous plant growth, but it suffered on the fruit end. I didn't think it produced enough of fruit, but still I learned that you can't take a Burpee Sweet 100 and ferment the seeds. Don't do that, because they don't usually come out the way you think they're going to come out. But that's the fun part of gardening, is when you get to experiment with these things.
Peter, Lauren asked, what crops do you plant that get the best reaction from elementary school, from your younger students?
By far, the tomatoes. By far. Yeah. a little cherry tomato, when they go, this is the problem that we had initially. I started a multitude of seedlings, and it's so funny because all of a sudden here's all these little elementary schools come out with their teachers, and I'm standing there with flats of tomato plants, and I'm like, it's a 4 by 8 foot bed. You know, if you put 5 vigorous plants in there, that's a lot, especially when they're indeterminate plants. Okay. But the kids, they just want to just start putting them in the ground everywhere. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. But like I told the teachers, I'm going to come back covertly and at night, once in a while, pick out a plant from here, pick out a plant from there, because you don't want to deny them the joy of actually planting it and seeing it grow. But it, to me, it's the tomatoes for the kids, because I encourage them, just pop it in your mouth, just eat it. That's why it's there. It's all goodness. So to me, definitely the little cherries, or like the little orange burst type uh, cherry type tomatoes, but the orange color always gets their eye. It's the fun stuff.
Great.
Mhm.
Great. Well, I want to be cognizant of attendees' time and your time, Peter. And people who joined us today, thank you so much for coming today and joining us. We'll send you the slide deck, and we'll send you, which has links at the end, and it also has Peter's email address and my email. And so if you want to follow up with a question, we're available. We hope you stay connected to Mass Farm to School, and let us know what you want to have workshops on. And if you are someone who wants to lead a workshop, by all means, please get in touch with me. We're always looking for people who want to share their passion and their knowledge. And we hope you have a great day, and thanks for coming today.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been great. By all means.
Thanks, Lauren. Please, please reach out and stay connected.
Terrific.